Right.
Now, remember the argument. The argument was science works. That was the claim, right? And science says that naturalism is true, right? So if naturalism is true, then that means there's no God, and therefore, since science works, is successful, there is no God.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the premise that he's getting at here is the issue of truth. Just because science works doesn't necessarily mean that it may be true, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. In fact, what we've seen is there's a whole host of theories that worked, that we held to, that we believed in, that we thought were good. They were good at the time, turned out to be not true.
Right. Well, and a couple episodes ago, or half a dozen, depending on how you listen to it, I made the claim that kind of the politicians and the men of science tend to have usurped the role of the priest. And if we go back to Greece or Roman times, you had people that were sought after for their knowledge and said, I want my daughter to be safe on this journey that I'm going to let her take for 4 months. What do I do? Oh, well, you have to stand underneath this cow, slit its throat, bathe in the blood, and then it'll be marked with a good journey.
Okay.
Yeah, really think. So, so you do it, and it
do I have to wear my good clothes?
Yeah. There's your sacrifice. And so how do we know that's the case? Well, because we're in communion with the gods, and they tell us, and we've also seen every time that someone does this, barring anything that they might do that would offset that sacrifice, then that sacrifice works. Oh, well, my daughter's train car was overturned and she broke her leg. What happened? Well, did she get on her journey on a Sunday? Ooh, you shouldn't have traveled on a Sunday. We should have told you beforehand. And so there's always those defeaters.
That's right.
And we do view that in science. In fact, Plantinga talks about defeaters in his model, and says that how much do you hold to a belief and you interact with defeaters until you kind of give up that belief. And so even scientists today have these defeatist scales where they come in contact with it and say, well, I don't have to accept that because of whatever it might be. So if we posit things like God, then there are certain defeaters that they can put in place and say, well, maybe the history is wrong, maybe the science wouldn't turn out correctly, maybe I have a bad understanding of what the claim of God is, and so we see what he says is true is that this continuation of kind of replacing priests for scientists seem to be in similar contention here as well.
Yeah, good. So he says that there are therefore decent reasons for being skeptical about scientific realism, about whether our current scientific theories give us the sober truth about the world ever beyond observation.